You may not know this, as I didn't, but every year since 1998, the first Sunday in May is designated as World Laughter Day. It was inaugurated by Dr. Madan Kataria, a Mumbai-based family doctor who, after researching a paper on whether laughter is in fact the best medicine, he retired from medical practice and decided to launch what he called a laughter club. And it began with 5 people laughing in a park in Mumbai. And today there are more than 5,000 laughter clubs all over the globe, with one based on 96th Street on the east side. And today, Kateria devotes all his time to writing, teaching, coaching, and training what he calls laughter leaders in order to foster the spread of more laughter clubs and the practice of what's now called laughter yoga. And he does this with the belief that laughing, even for no reason, lowers stress, reduces blood pressure, strengthens immunity, improves health, and accelerates healing. And he is not alone in that belief. Dr. William Fry of Stanford University pioneered the field of gelotology, the study of the psychological and physiological effects of laughter. And he concluded too that sniggering, snickering, chuckling, giggling, chortling, and snorting all have some analgesic or pain relieving qualities. And of course, for fans of the silver screen, the therapeutic quality of comedy was stressed by Robin Williams in his role as the provocative medical student Patch Adams, the Illinois-based founder of the Gesundheit Institute. And in truth, as far back as the 13th century, the French surgeon Henri de Mondeville advised visitors to try and make convalescing patients laugh to hasten their recovery. Laughter is one of the more powerful forces against adversity and can relieve not only pain, but despair and grief. It is a gift from God shared by many creatures in which our lungs convulse at rapid speed to expel the heaviness in our hearts. And as Jews, we have used humor to deflect some of the most dark periods of our past. And we've produced a disproportionate number of comics over the last century. This development has been addressed by Professor Ruth Weiss in her book No Joke, by Professor Jeremy Dauber in his book Jewish Comedy, and Professor Michael Krasny in his book Let There Be Laughter, and many, many others. In fact, reflecting on a life of making people laugh and the prevalence of Jews in the rise of American comedy, Melvin Kaminsky, or as you may know him, Mel Brooks, once remarked, history has been so hard on the Jews that God decided that for every 10 Jews, he would make one to entertain the others. And by the age of 7, Mel Brooks said, I realized that I was one of those Jews. Which leads us all to a rather stunning moment in the early history of our people, when our first collective mother not only seems to be vilified, but chastised for laughing. Upon hearing her house guests suggest that she would conceive and give birth to a son after 90 years of infertility, she reacts with a little of that best medicine. V'titzchak Sarah b'kirba. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, Acharev loti haytali edna, now that I'm withered, shall I indeed have joy? V'adoni zakein, my husband is old. And instantaneously, in the very next verse, God appears to Abraham to protest. V'yom Hashem al Avraham. God says, Lama ze'esecha Sarah? Why is your wife laughing? And this is my question. Why is God so enraged, so livid and dismayed at Sarah laughing? And what compounds that question is that not only is Sarah condemned for laughing, but her husband did the exact same thing last week without eliciting a peep from heaven. On hearing from God himself that he and his wife would have a child, Avram falls to the floor, v'yipol al panav, and vayitzchak, he laughs, vayomer bilibo, and he says to himself, almost exactly as Sarah does, halaven mea shana, will a 100-year-old person yivaled have a child, v'im Sarah habat tishim shana teled, and will my wife of 90 years give birth? Now, there are times when the accusations of scriptural misogyny are misplaced or misguided or intentionally subversive or unjustified, but here it seems clear that Sarah suffers from unequal treatment, that the first patriarch is the first beneficiary of the patriarchy. Why does God, who we know is above prejudice and we know detests biases Why does he censure Sarah while at best overlooking, at worst embracing the same behavior from her husband? And there are three answers to this question that I'd like to share with you today. First, we turn, of course, to Rashi, who relies on the view of an ancient translator, because though in the text itself the same term is used for Avram and Sarah's laugh, Yitzchak v'Titzchak, the Targum renders them very differently. When Avram laughs, Onkelos translate Vayitzchak as v'chadi, he rejoiced, like the word chedva. But when Sarah laughs, he translates V'Titzchak as v'chayachat, she scoffed. A distinction which Rashi goes on to elucidate. Avram he'emin v'samach, Avram believed and rejoiced, but Sarah lo hamina v'liglata, she did not believe, and she scorned. And that is why Rashi says, Hikpid HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Sarah, God criticized Sarah, but not Avram. It is true for Rashi and Onkelos that laughter can heal and can signal deep delight and bliss. But laughter can also be a tool of cruelty or contempt or disinterest. It can be used to ridicule or deride or tease or taunt. There are chuckles, but there are cackles. There is merriment, but there is irreverence. There are laughs that cheer, and there are laughs that sneer. And for the great medieval French commentator and an ancient Aramean translator, the laughs of Avram and Sarah could not have been more different. Through a moral lens, one was most apposite and the other was quite the opposite. But it was a diplomat from Spain who disagreed in the extreme. For the Abarbanel, Avram and Sarah both laughed with joy. Upon hearing the news that they would have a child, they both cried with delight, a perfectly valid, even admirable reaction. But there was something specific about Sarah's otherwise laudable laughter that signaled a fracture in her faith. Because for the Abarbanel, this was the second time that Sarah had heard the news. There is no doubt, he says, in Safek, that before any of the angels set foot in their tent, Sarah had already been told that she would have a child. In Safek, Shigid Avraham. There is no doubt that Avram told her, Mashana Malo, what was told to him at the end of last week. So when she hears the house guests prophesy her son's conception, she should have been perfectly calm, seamlessly composed, and responded by saying, I know, Avraham already told me. Her joy and surprise and deep-seated and ecstatic disbelief was only a problem because it showed that she didn't believe her husband. In the word of the Abarbanel, lo hayara'uila, it would improper for her to laugh. Tikva shama azem in Nevuat Avraham. She had already heard this news from her husband. But there is a final view that I'd like to share, suggested by a friend of mine, that suggests that what the Abarbanel considered to be inconceivable beyond doubt was in fact the case, and that perhaps it is not Sarah who is being censured in this scene. Nachmanides makes it clear that in his view, Avraham lo gilana hanemala. Avram had not revealed his prophecy to Sarah. She had no idea that she would conceive or bear a child. Ulahim tim ad shloach Hashem. Maybe Avram was waiting for God to contact Sarah himself. Oh, or maybe Merov Zrizu Toba mitzvot, due to his enthusiasm to fulfill mitzvot, he was involved with his circumcision and circumcising his company. Va'achakain, and after that, b'chul shato, in exhaustion, Yeshiv lo petach ha'oel, he collapsed at the entrance of his tent. V'malachim ba'u terem she'igid ladavar, and the angels arrived before he had a chance to speak with his wife. So maybe when Sarah hears her guests suggest that she will have a son, she was taken by complete surprise and was overcome with glee. Perhaps she did laugh with delight and gave voice to the joy of a woman who had dreamed for decades of having a child, who had harbored hopes of feeding and holding and soothing and raising a baby. Perhaps her laugh was indeed a sound that dispels darkness. And maybe when God speaks to Avram and asks why Sarah laughed, it wasn't the laugh that was the problem, but the fact that Sarah was finding out now for the first time, and that he had not shared the news that was revealed to him with his wife. Perhaps that's why God reaches out to Avram and not Sarah with the question. Perhaps that's why Sarah lies and denies that she laughed, not to defend herself, but to protect her husband from heaven's wrath. And the truth is, we could forgive Avraham for thinking that telling Sarah the news wasn't the first priority. For years, she had come to accept that she wouldn't have a child. Over decades, her hope had dissipated and withered, and she no longer had any expectation of raising another generation. So the news could wait while he fulfilled the duties that he had been ordered to perform. No harm would be done in her waiting a little longer to hear of a miracle. And perhaps the lesson that God discloses in his reproach here is that hopelessness is not a static condition. Our emotional state isn't binary. We're not either okay or not okay. We are in constant flux, and despair can deepen with every passing moment as hope can always grow. And it is true that Sarah no longer expected to conceive, but that did not mean that she had ceased grieving or that her agony had reached its peak. With each day, her loss felt more debilitating, her lack felt more devastating, her inability to bear children felt more unbearable. And had Avram understood her pain, he would have run to her side to tell her the news, not simply to give her hope, but to stop her hopelessness from growing. Every moment of attention or care or empathy that we share with another is a weighted gesture that persists in time, that survives our encounter and fuels the future. Every moment is an opportunity to bequeath happiness and meaning. So let us all aspire to harness that power and lift each other's lives with hope. I wish you a Shavua Tov.